Have you ever been in a situation where everything seemed to be going perfectly? The chemistry was real, the connection was growing, and then they just shut down. Out of nowhere, the person you were getting close to seems distant, cold, confused. Maybe they even say, "I don't know what I feel anymore." And you're left wondering, did I imagine it all? If this feels painfully familiar, you might have been connecting with someone who has a fearful avoidant attachment style, a person wired for both intense desire and deep fear of intimacy. I'm Jim Rohn, and in this video, I'm breaking down 5 reasons why fearful avoidants suddenly lose feelings, even when they seemed all in just days or weeks before. Because here's the truth. What feels like losing interest is often not about you at all. It's about internal panic, masquerading as detachment. We'll explore what actually causes this sudden shift from unresolved trauma to emotional overwhelm to subconscious self-sabotage. You'll understand why your warmth can trigger their walls and how their nervous system starts sounding the alarm just as they get what they say they want. And the 5th reason? It's the most misunderstood and the one that could finally explain their hot and cold behavior. If you've been caught in this confusing dance, I want you to know, you're not crazy and you're not unlovable. You're just facing someone who's emotionally split and reacting in survival mode. So stick with me. By the end of this video, you'll have more clarity, self-respect, and insight into this pattern than most people ever get. And if you want more tools to understand these emotional dynamics and navigate relationships from a secure, grounded place, hit subscribe. Every week, we unpack the truth behind attachment and help you stop chasing confusion and start choosing real connection. Let's get into it. One of the core reasons a fearful avoidant partner might suddenly lose all emotional momentum in a relationship comes down to trust. Not just minor doubts or misunderstandings, but a full collapse of their sense of emotional safety. For someone with this attachment style, trust isn't just important, it's everything. Their nervous system is already wired to expect betrayal or abandonment, so when something happens that confirms those fears, like discovering infidelity, a major lie, or finding out a critical truth was withheld for too long, it doesn't just hurt, it validates their deepest belief that closeness leads to pain. And when that switch flips, what you often see is a complete emotional withdrawal. It's not a slow fade or passive cooling off, it's a shutdown. In their mind, the relationship stops feeling like a safe place and instead becomes something to escape. And here's the tricky part. Even if they had strong feelings before, even if they were emotionally invested, once they feel that safety is gone, many fearful avoidants don't just struggle to reconnect, they lose the will to try. That magnetic draw toward closeness, it's replaced with a sharp instinct to protect themselves at all costs. It's not just, "I'm hurt." It becomes, "Why would I risk feeling like this again?" And in that headspace, rebuilding attraction or emotional intimacy often feels pointless to them. So yes, a major rupture in trust, especially one that hits deep emotional nerves, can cause a sudden, total disconnection that's hard to come back from, no matter how much history or potential was there before. The second, equally common and widely misunderstood, reason why an avoidant, fearful partner begins to lose attraction is this. Their emotional boundaries have been quietly and repeatedly crossed. And the tricky part, they rarely say it. They often don't even realize it. It doesn't usually happen in one big dramatic moment. It happens in a slow build-up, small, constant tugs on their emotional space, check-ins that feel like pressure, closeness that comes too quickly, well-meaning questions that, to them, feel like expectation. Fearful avoidants are deeply conflicted people. On one hand, they crave connection. On the other, they fear being consumed by it. So when they start dating someone who is anxiously attached, someone who seeks reassurance, depth, and high levels of emotional presence, it can feel good at first, even thrilling. But over time, If their need for autonomy starts to get crowded out by another person's emotional intensity, they don't usually set boundaries or ask for space. They shut down, quietly, swiftly, without clear explanation. And here's what that looks like from the outside. You notice the conversations are shorter. The emotional warmth fades. The texts get more mechanical. It starts to feel like they're just going through the motions, or worse, pulling away completely. You might even sense the shift before you can name it. It's that gut feeling that says, something's changed, but I don't know why. This kind of emotional shutdown isn't always about you, but it is about the pace and pressure of the connection. Fearful avoidants tend to be hypersensitive to losing themselves in a relationship. So if they feel like their independence, space, or identity are being slowly erased by the emotional closeness, they may begin to lose interest. Not because they stop caring, but because they feel like they're disappearing. And when that happens, desire dies. Attraction dims. The energy they once poured into the relationship gets rerouted, often into work, distractions, or solitude. Not as punishment, but as survival. And here's the real kicker. Many anxious partners assume that if they just love harder, explain more, or stay consistent, the avoidant will eventually soften. But that approach often makes things worse, because what the fearful avoidant actually needs is space to feel like themselves again. Space to breathe. Space to want to come back. When that space isn't given, their brain interprets the relationship as a threat, not a refuge. So let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like the more emotionally available you became, the more they drifted? Have you ever watched someone pull away not because you did something wrong, but because you got too close? Drop a comment if this is making sense. Or if you've ever had that sick feeling in your stomach where things were going great and then they just weren't. That shift isn't random, it has a pattern. And once you understand that pattern, you stop blaming yourself and start responding from a place of calm clarity. So stay with me, you're about to see the full picture. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. This is where emotional chaos turns into grounded clarity. A third reason a fearful avoidant might suddenly go cold, even when things seem to be going well, has to do with expectations. Specifically, the perception that too much is being asked of them too soon. Now, this can be incredibly confusing because on the surface, the avoidant might have been showing up, initiating, even investing quite a bit in the early stages. They might have seemed all in, texting regularly, making plans, opening up emotionally. But beneath that effort, there's often a hidden tension building, and here's where it gets complicated. Fearful avoidants tend to set internal expectations on themselves that are already sky high. So when they feel like their efforts aren't being seen, appreciated, or worse, are being met with more demands, something flips. It's not necessarily about what's being said. It's often about what's being felt. If the other person starts needing more clarity, more emotional depth, more consistent connection, even if those needs are completely reasonable, the avoidant may start interpreting that as pressure. It triggers a deep inner script that whispers, "No matter what I give, it'll never be enough." And from there, it's a short trip to frustration, emotional overwhelm, and eventually shutdown. You might see them go from warm to distant, from engaged to indifferent. And what's so painful here is that they often feel justified in pulling away, because in their mind, they were already giving more than they usually do. So when you ask for more, it feels like criticism, or worse, rejection of the version of them they tried so hard to be. The irony is, most anxious or securely attached partners in this situation aren't trying to pile on pressure, they're trying to grow closer. But to a fearful avoidant, that closeness can start to feel like a demand to be more emotionally available than they feel safe being. And that's the core issue: safety. When emotional expectations exceed what they believe they can sustainably give, they instinctively create distance to protect their sense of self. It's not a logical decision. It's a nervous system response. It's self-preservation wrapped in silence. So if you've ever felt someone slowly back away just as things were deepening, even after they seemed all in, ask yourself, was there an unspoken sense of more building between you? Because for someone wired to equate emotional demands with danger, even subtle shifts in tone or energy can register as pressure. And when that happens, the attraction doesn't just fade, it shuts down. What's your experience with this? Have you ever been blindsided by someone who said they wanted connection, then disappeared the moment you leaned in? Drop your story in the comments. This is where real learning happens, when we name these patterns and start choosing differently. Another powerful trigger that can cause an avoidant to suddenly lose interest is feeling trapped, which is reason 4. And what's important to understand here is that this doesn't necessarily mean that someone is actually controlling or manipulative. It's about the pace of moving from light and exploratory to heavy with expectation. When an avoidant feels like the pace of the relationship is accelerating beyond what they feel ready for, whether it's conversations about commitment, future plans, or simply emotional closeness that seems like too much too soon, their nervous system interprets it as a threat. Not because they're not interested, but because that closeness starts to feel like a loss of personal freedom. For someone with this attachment style, autonomy isn't just a preference, it's a form of survival. So when they perceive that their space is being closed in on, even by well-meaning affection, they don't usually communicate it with calm words. They bolt. This is often a deeply ingrained flight response developed from earlier emotional experiences where closeness felt unsafe or unpredictable. So when they begin to feel cornered by the relationship, it can activate a sense of panic they don't fully understand themselves. That panic often shows up as emotional distance, coldness, or even ghosting. Not because they stopped liking you, but because their brain is screaming, "Get out now before you lose yourself." If you've ever felt someone pull away right after things started to feel serious, this could be what was playing out underneath. And the more pressure they feel, even unintentionally, the more likely they are to retreat fast and far. Recognizing this early can save you from taking it personally. The final, most important, but least talked about reason why an avoidant, fearful partner suddenly feels the attraction fading is emotional exhaustion. But not the kind that comes from the other person asking for too much. I'm talking about the kind that comes from within. Exhaustion that builds up when they keep giving without ever expressing what they need. You see, many avoidant, fearful people don't feel safe enough to voice their own emotional needs. Maybe they fear being judged, rejected, or misunderstood. Maybe they feel like it's risky to take up space. So what do they do instead? They give the other person energy. They try their best to be enough, to keep the peace, to meet expectations. And at first it may seem like they're giving it their all, but behind the scenes they're running out of steam. Over time, this imbalance grows. The avoidant starts feeling unseen, unappreciated, but not because the other person doesn't care. Often it's because they never said anything, and because they didn't speak up, they begin internalizing the story that this relationship is one-sided, that their needs never matter, and eventually they hit a wall. It's usually not loud, it's a quiet moment of emotional shutoff where they think, "I'm done, I can't do this anymore." And once that internal switch flips, it's very hard to reverse. By the time they finally pull away or end things, they've already rehearsed the exit in their mind 100 times. Not out of cruelty, but because they waited too long to speak up. And now, leaving feels like the only way to reclaim themselves. Here's the truth. If you're a fearful avoidant and this pattern feels familiar, your real work isn't about managing attraction. It's about learning to advocate for your emotional needs before the burnout sets in. Even if you're not in the right relationship, practice naming your needs anyway. Because if you don't, you're not just starving the connection, you're starving yourself. And if you've been on the receiving end of this kind of quiet fade, ask yourself, Did they ever really feel safe enough to speak? Sometimes, the most attractive thing in love isn't effort, it's emotional honesty. Let that sit with you. At the end of the day, fearful avoidants don't lose feelings randomly. Their emotional retreat is often a response to internal overwhelm, unmet needs, or the fear of losing themselves in connection. Whether it's the weight of unspoken expectations, a loss of autonomy, or the slow burn of emotional burnout, each reason we explored today reveals one simple truth. Relationships that lack safety, for both people, can't sustain attraction. The more we understand these patterns, the more we stop personalizing someone else's emotional withdrawal and start building relationships rooted in clarity, mutual respect, and emotional honesty. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to watch this video. If it resonated with you or helped you see something in a new light, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let's start a real conversation. Your insights and experiences matter more than you know. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more content that helps you navigate complex relationship dynamics with emotional clarity and confidence. You deserve connection that feels safe, mutual, and real. Until next time, stay grounded, stay true to yourself, and never forget, your needs are valid, and love should never feel like a guessing game.